John from Heroes and Legends, and welcome to this special edition of the Magic the Gathering Market Watch, where we're going to look at standard singles and how they were affected by this past weekend's Pro Tour Hour of Devastation. Now, if you saw the Pro Tour this weekend, you know what I'm talking about here. You're going to see some big spikes, especially in red cards. Red looked incredible. Ramanap Red, which is basically a mono red aggro deck, was phenomenal and very dominant this weekend. Some other decks did well too. We saw Mono Black Zombies actually do good, kind of had a comeback. It was a decent matchup against these aggro red decks. We saw some black red aggro as well sprinkled in there. Some Golgari Constrictor did okay. We saw some energy decks even do okay, so there was a decent variety, but what stood out most were these red decks, no doubt, and you're going to see that definitely reflected in the prices, and I'll give some more insight, of course, as we go through the individual cards. Now, quickly before we get started, if you check out the description below, you'll find a couple ways to help support us, one of which is our Amazon affiliate store. If you make any purchases there, whether it's the singles you see here today, or really anything else, a small percentage will come back to help support us, goes a long way. Secondly, you'll also find our Patreon page, a link below as well. With that out of the way, let's get into the cards. And we're going to start off with the top 10 standard cards that have lost value this week. Now, you're going to notice we're not going to see large losses here. A few cards are just still ticking down from the pre-release prices, stuff like that. But a lot of players are in a holding pattern right now when it comes to selling stuff off, because you do have to remember one thing. No matter what you see in the Pro Tour, you can expect a pretty drastic change in the metagame over the course of the next 3-4 weeks as players start to adapt to some of the decks that did well in the Pro Tour. So we usually see this. The Pro Tour, like last time around, we saw Mono Black Zombies deck win the whole thing. By the end of the meta, Mono Black Zombies were not doing so well. So it just had to do with some adjustments that players made. And I think because of that, a lot of people are hesitant to sell off some of the cards that maybe used to be good or they think could still be good. That's what you're seeing here this week. Number 10, Hollow One, down 23 cents to $1.13. This one's simply still ticking down from a overhyped pre-release price. This card was overvalued, I think, by a lot of folks, and just simply two things going against it right now. First off, yes, if you can get it out early, a 4/4 is decent, but at the same time, it's asking you to jump through a lot of hoops. You have to kind of be very lucky to be able to get this out early enough for it to matter. Secondly, we live in a world where Braid is basically everywhere, so that's really going to hold a card like this back. Coming in number 9, Visage of Bolas, down 24 cents to 60 cents. Now, this card comes from the Planeswalker Nicol Bolas deck, and it is not found in the regular Hour of Devastation pack, so I do want to point that out. Now, Nicol Bolas the Deceiver is good, but it's more of a casual commander Planeswalker. It's not a card you're going to see necessarily cross over to standard or anything like that. But players that maybe didn't want to actually just buy the entire deck outright were looking to pick up perhaps Bolas as a single. And this is a single over the course of the last couple weeks. A lot of that demand is being met now, so this card will trickle down a little bit. It's already down to 60 cents. Probably can't go down too much lower. Coming in number 8, Startled Awake, down 24 cents to $7. Now, coming into this meta game, there was a strong push from a lot of brewers trying to get that mill deck to work. I kind of thought it was unintuitive considering the fact there's so many graveyard interactions currently out there. It just felt a little counter to what was going on in the format to me, and it didn't quite get there, unfortunately. Now, it doesn't mean that those type of combos won't work in Commander. I think there's some Commander players running them right now, as a matter of fact, and maybe even down the road someone can solve this type of thing for Modern, but at least for right now, this card is going to continue to trickle down. We'll have to kind of wait and see what happens. Coming in number 7, Hour of Devastation, down 24 cents to $7.90. Now, this is a card that was doing well last week, actually spiked pretty good. It's snapping back a little bit this week. Didn't look super impressive at the Pro Tour due to the fact that the decks that were really good didn't want to run this because it was kind of counterintuitive to what they were trying to do, namely the aggressive red decks or the Mono Black Zombie decks. But aside from that, it's still a good card. In fact, it might see more play going forward considering it is a good foil against those strategies. So keep an eye on this one. I do expect this to stabilize. Now, it is a rare. It's not a mythic. So adjust your expectations. It's going to be really hard for this to stick around the $8 mark. I don't necessarily see that. But this card could still see a fair amount of play going forward. Maybe sits around the $5-6 mark. Number 6, Gideon, Ally of Zendikar, down 26 cents to 13.33. I talked a lot about Gideon on Saturday in our regular market watch. This is an interesting card. It's not completely absent from Standard. I mean, it still shows up in some vehicles decks and stuff like that. It's not completely gone, but a lot of players are moving on. This is the last meta that Gideon will exist before rotation. So if you're moving on to, say, a Ramanap Red strategy for this meta, then you can sell off your Gideon. So that's what we're going to start seeing here as Gideon continues to go down. Now, Gideon's an interesting card because he does see play in Modern, does see play in Legacy. So long term, it might not be a bad idea to grab some copies of the card just in case you ever want to get into those decks in the future. I would wait a little bit, though, until maybe closer to the rotation time. You can probably find this card under $10 relatively easy in about a month or so. Number 5, Uncage the Menagerie, down 28 cents to $2. This is another card I was kind of low on coming out of the pre-release. I think it's a decent card. We've seen this type of card in a better form, actually in a number of better forms in the past. So because of that, you're not going to see it cross over into like Modern or anything like that necessarily. Standard, I think Standard's just too good and too fast for this right now. Maybe post-rotation, this could see a tad bit of play, so keep an eye on it. For right now, it's going to continue to go down. Number 4, Solemnity, down 28 cents to 5.09. I think this is a little short-sighted of some players. I think because everyone is so focused on the Pro Tour in the past weekend's result, people aren't paying attention to Solemnity, and the card has sat around the $5 mark pretty much since it has been revealed during the pre-release, which is unusual for a card that has so much potential power behind it. The card's already doing good things in Commander, and I do think eventually someone will find an efficient way to break this card in Modern. So keep in mind that if you can find these for maybe under $5 and you want to have a play set for the future, I don't think that's a bad pickup at all. I do think right now players' focus is on Standard and not necessarily paying attention to what this card can do long term. Coming in at number 3, Ramanap Excavator, down 33 cents to 5.49. Another example of players' attention maybe being elsewhere, because right now in Modern, there is a new company deck that Todd Stevens played in the Teams Open a week ago that looks amazing, and it runs this card. Now, it looks like it's a great foil against Death Shadow decks, which is really saying something, because there are a lot of players running those in the field. Even though that deck doesn't necessarily win all the tournaments or anything, the percentage of play for those decks, and there's actually a number of different variants of those decks now, is quite high. And if you have a deck that is good against those, that deck is probably going to be successful. So keep an eye on this card. I feel like this will be ticking up in the future. Now, it is a rare, it's not a mythic, so again, keep your expectations for this card subtle, but at the same time, I could see it climbing maybe around $8, $9 a few months down the road. Number 2, Heart of Kirin, down 36 cents to 11.64. This is from Ether Revolt, of course, and that was a set that had a lot of packs opened, even though this is a mythic, so keep that in mind. And this card isn't completely gone either as far as Standard goes. There are some vehicles decks. There's actually a 4-color vehicle deck that did pretty well in the Pro Tour, and of course was running copies of this. So yeah, the card's not out of the question, and because it's not rotating out, it's got some time left in Standard. It could rebound at any given time, honestly. So I would wait a little longer. I think it will continue to drop in this current meta. And then maybe around rotation time, you might want to think about picking one of these up. You can probably find them $5, $8 at that point. Might be good just to have on hand for the future. Number 1, Frank's Sanity, down 39 cents to 4.50. So I talked about this card earlier. Basically, the middle deck just never got there. But like I said, where there's a will, there's a way. So don't forget about this card. Commander players are playing it, and there are even some Modern brewers trying to make it work. Maybe post-rotation, granted it won't have Startled Awake anymore, but maybe some other cards will join it, and it could have a chance. You never know. All right, let's move on to the cards that have gained value this week. And as you can imagine, we're going to see a lot of the hot cards from the Pro Tour. We're also going to see some cards from a deck that was hot maybe going into the Pro Tour, but didn't really perform well there. Number 10, Ramanap Ruins, up 67 cents to 93 cents. Not an expensive card, but a very high increase percentage-wise. And no doubt this is due to the fact that this card looked great in the Pro Tour. I mean, the deck is called Ramanap Red, so stands to reason this card's going to be really good in it. And 5 copies in the top 8 of the Pro Tour, and that's going to catch some attention. And as you can imagine, this card will continue to creep up. It isn't uncommon, so again, I don't really see this getting above maybe a couple dollars, but at the same time, it is probably going to still go higher than where it is now. Number 9, a Braid, another uncommon, 77 cents to 282. So a Braid is just simply everywhere. I can't say enough good things about this card. The card looks phenomenal in Standard. Now, it's not going to be the next Fatal Push because it doesn't cross over as well into, say, a Modern or a Legacy or anything like that. But at the same time, this is going to be a key card in Standard basically for its entire lifetime there. Coming in number 8, Bomat Courier, up 83 cents to 154. Great little aggro artifact card. I mean, it's cheap. It gets in there for a little bit of early damage, but maybe more importantly, later on, it allows you some card selection or, in some cases, card draw. And if you can start to refresh your hand a little bit as an aggro deck, that can go a really long way. This card looked great over the weekend. Number 7, Cataclysmic Gearhulk, up 98 cents this week to $2. Now, this is one of the cards that was a key part of the God Pharaoh's Gift deck. That deck looked good and maybe exciting going into the Pro Tour. Didn't look all that great at the Pro Tour, unfortunately. Now, it did well in a Star City Games Classic the week before, although that is a much smaller tournament than, say, a regular Star City Games Open, so keep that in mind. But the deck itself captured a lot of players' imaginations. It just looks like a fun deck to play, right? So this was a key part of it. Even though week to week this card's up a little bit, it's already starting to come down as players are moving on to other things in the Standard format. Coming in number 6, Champion of Wits, up 98 cents to 627. Now, this is another key card in the God Pharaoh's Gift deck. However, this did see play in a number of emerged decks as well over the first few weeks of the new meta. Now, unlike the other key cards in that God Pharaoh's Gift deck, this one is staying stable. Over the last 72 hours, where a lot of those other cards have gone down in value, this one is stuck right at its current price point, basically. So with that in mind, it's an indication that players are not giving up on this card, that they feel like the raw power level is there for some future Standard play, and I agree with them. I think simply this card is really good, has strong power behind it, could even see some Modern play down the road. I wouldn't be shocked at that. And definitely during its time in Standard, it's going to have a number of times where it surges. So if you don't have a play set of this yet, you might be able to wait a few weeks. Right now, the attention's off this card as they move on to, say, a lot of the red cards is where you'll find the spotlight right now. Then maybe get this around $4 or $5 in a few weeks. I think it's a good pickup at that point. Coming in at number 5, God Pharaoh's Gift, up $1.68 to $3. Again, week to week it's up, but over the last 72 hours, this card has been going down. Now, a lot of players are still going to play this deck. And look at your Friday Night Magics and stuff like that. You're going to find this deck because it's fun. It looks really cool to play. And a lot of people are going to be drawn to it because of its interactions and just it's a little bit quirky and fun. And I think players that are into those type of decks are not going to give up on this thing. So this card probably won't completely bottom out, but I do expect this to go down, probably sit around maybe the $2 mark in the future. Coming in at number 3, Angel of Invention, up $1.97 this week to $7.55. Another key part of that God Pharaoh's Gift deck, which again has gone down quite a bit in the last 72 hours or so. So yes, this card is also on the decline, but again, it won't go down to the point where it was prior to the spike. Number 3, Earthshaker Kenra, up $3.13 to $4.59. Now we're getting into the real deal. On Monday, this card was valued at under $1, and I said in the video on Monday, go out now and get your play sets, because if you can find a play set of these things for $4 or less, it's going to be great value for you going forward. You won't have to spend more later. Well, I hope you heeded that advice, because right now we're looking at a card that's approaching the $5 mark, and it looked incredible during the Pro Tour. Of course, a key part of these Ramanap red decks, and also even the black-red aggro decks. So yeah, the card's awesome. It's going to go up a little more. Now, again, it is a rare. It's not a mythic, so adjust those expectations. You're not going to see a $15 price point or anything for this card in the future. But I could see it going up a little more before it starts to go back down. Coming in number 2, Chandra Torch of Defiance, up $5.78 this week to $34.99. Another card that's part of that Ramanap red deck. And this one, though, keep a couple things in mind. First off, sometimes it's like 2 in the main. Sometimes this card is actually coming out of the sideboard. Now, the deck that won the Pro Tour, the Apollo, was running 2 of these in the main, but other versions are boarding this in. So this isn't like a slam dunk 4 of in that deck or anything like that. So do keep that in mind when it comes to the value of this card. Second thing you want to keep in mind, Kaladesh. Yes, this is a mythic, but a lot of packs of Kaladesh have been open. There's a lot of copies of this floating around. Now, the good news is this card has been seeing play in Standard. It's been great in like Vehicles decks and such prior to this. And also it's seeing play in Modern and like Titan Shift decks. So the card has a foothold, not only in Standard, but also Modern. But I will say this, it cannot maintain this value at $35. This is definitely a spike coming off the Pro Tour excitement and the Pro Tour hype, and also partially the good performance of this card just generally. So this card may go up a little bit over the next couple weeks, keep that in mind, but I do think that eventually this goes down to probably settle in around the $25 mark as this meta continues, and eventually will even go lower than that. But at least for right now, it is riding high around $35. Coming in at number 1, the card of the weekend, Hezeret the Fervent, up 1073 to 1688. Now, way back when this card was originally previewed, what I said about it was, a lot of people are hard on the card, but this is an incredible aggro card. Not good in other decks, but in an aggro deck, this card is perfect. Aggro decks want to dump their hand fast. They want a big, cheap, indestructible haste creature like this. I mean, 4 for a 5/4. If you can actually attack with it, it's phenomenal. And you know what else aggro decks want? They want to be able to pitch those lands that they don't need, that they end up drawing in the mid to late game. This lets you pitch those lands for damage. This card has it all, and it looked incredible this weekend. The card finally had a deck to excel in, and it truly did excel. And because of that, you're seeing a huge, huge spike in this card. Now, spikes is big. We've seen this many, many, many times in the past. They don't last, and this one won't either. As players get their copies and the hype subsides from the Pro Tour, the value will start coming down. We're probably looking at the peak or maybe almost the peak of this card at this point. But once players get their copies, and the metagame will shift a little bit because a lot of players will have this deck in their crosshairs. So they're going to start sideboarding strategies against it, which could hurt its percentage of the field going forward as we move on through the meta. We saw this with Mono Black Zombies in the previous meta. It won a Pro Tour. By the end of the meta, it was kind of struggling to stay around and stay relevant. So you never know with these decks. A lot's going to change over the next couple months. But at the same time, right now, this card is super hot. And I think it will go up a little more before it starts to snap back. All right, with that being said, those are the cards for today. And this has been a crazy weekend. Great Pro Tour. And even though red was very dominant, there were other decks hanging around. And I do think once the meta adjusts, and I'm hoping anyway, that we'll have a pretty diverse format for Standard. So we'll wait and see. Hopefully that's what happens over the next couple weeks. But we'll keep you posted on everything. Of course, Saturday we'll have another Market Watch. A little bit later in the week, I'm going to do my Market Watch Special Edition, which are the August picks of the month, too. We're going to talk about Modern in that video. So until then, hey, thanks for watching. Please remember to like and subscribe, and have a great day. Hey, thanks for watching. This video is made possible by the generous support of viewers like you on Patreon. Check out the description below for links to our Patreon page as well as our Amazon affiliate store, where a small percentage of all sales will also help support the channel. Finally, if you haven't had a chance yet to subscribe, hit that subscribe button so you don't miss any new videos on Heroes and Legends. Talk to you again soon, and have a great day.